So if you've ever scrambled to throw things behind a closed door or in a different room anytime someone's coming over in order to avoid shame or embarrassment, you are not alone. In fact, I used to feel this way anytime that a friend would call and say, hey, I'm on my way over, right? Sheer panic set in. Shame seems to hold hands with clutter, and today it's time to break free from that feeling. So shame is defined as this really intense feeling that we have about ourselves, and typically it comes from failing to live up to our or even other people's standards and expectations. And we see it as proof that we are bad, that we are stupid, that we are inferior, and it really impacts our self-esteem. The thing is, when you are prone to shame, you tend to think that every bad action or every pile of clutter says something about who you are as a person. And every mistake, no matter how big or how small, makes you feel like less of a person. How do I know? Because I used to feel shame on a daily basis when it came to the state of my home. And when we feel like bad people, we do nothing. We take zero action. And all the while, the piles, the mess, the clutter that's sitting and growing in our home only sits there, gets bigger, and reinforces this identity and keeps us stuck and rooted in that shame. And we ultimately believe like we're bad. As someone who has experienced this and who also struggles with perfectionism, trust me, I know the struggle is very real. By the way, if you too struggle with being a perfectionist, make sure to watch this video I did a few months back because it will really help. So clutter shame gets triggered in us for a variety of reasons. So today I'm going to cover some of those top reasons and what you can do to shift that so you can begin to release some of that shame and just feel better about who you are as a person, because you are a rock star. You're amazing. Number one is this belief that kind of has subconsciously and also consciously infiltrated our culture over the past generations. And that is this: the tidiness of my home is a reflection of who I am as a human, or maybe a mom, or maybe a wife, or maybe a parent, right? With this type of belief, it leaves no room for anything but perfection, right? Everything has to be in its right place. Our home has to look perfectly tidy at all times. Or we're a terrible person. It makes zero sense if you really think about it. So oftentimes what comes up for people is, if my home it doesn't look like it's out of a 1950s Good Housekeeping ad, I am failing as a person. My home has to look spotless at all times. And so if you take anything from this video today, I want to encourage you that we all need to just squash this belief. Seriously, it's so frustrating to me that people tie their worth, their self-esteem, their everything into the state of their home. Listen, we're human. Homes aren't supposed to be tidy 24/7. That's not realistic. And this perfect picture that was painted generations ago and of how the home should look, it doesn't need to be that way. So let's shatter that belief. And you must remember that you are not your clutter. You are also not your most prized possessions. We are not our things, and our things do not define us. Brene Brown says, shame corrodes the very part of us that believes that we are capable of change. And that's such an important reminder when we're dealing with shame, right? If we are rooted and stuck in shame, we're not going to be able to take action. We're not going to think, even if I did take action, what's going to matter? I'm going to fail. So to combat this, you have to be able to make a clear distinction between your home as its own entity, as your own entity, right? They are not one and the same. And also creating these new benchmarks of what success can look like can be really fruitful here. Oftentimes when we're stuck in shame, we get into this black and white thinking, like in order to dig myself out of this clutter, I have to quit my job, or I have to spend 2 weeks straight decluttering and organizing, and it has to look a certain way because I want to get it all done. And because we can't actually execute it in the way we think it should look, again, we don't take action. That's overwhelming. Most people can't quit their job or aren't going to quit their job in order to get their home to be a supportive place. And so what does that look like? Small action steps that you can realistically plug into your everyday schedule. We talked about that on this video, right? How to create a declutter plan that you won't burn out on. These new ideas of what success looks like. What is something you can do, a habit, a system, 10 minutes a day decluttering. It doesn't have to be this huge transformational thing or lifestyle change. Little bits here and there, getting them done, taking action is going to move the needle instead of just staying put and doing nothing. Listen, I used to feel immense shame anytime someone came to my home. I remember after my first son was born, I was blessed to have friends and family members calling me saying, hey, I'd love to bring some food over. And remember just this sheer panic set in. And I was looking around my living room where I sit and do these videos videos now and going, oh my gosh, there's rice on the floor in the kitchen behind me. There's toys everywhere. There's dirty clothes. There's diapers everywhere. This is a mess. As a perfectionist, I was like, all my flaws were going to be exposed if they saw what my home for what it really was, which was a disaster zone. And then my mind immediately shamed me for the state of my home, right? I was highly critical. I had this narrative running. What's wrong with you? Why can't you do this? You're just a failure, right? All these really terrible things that we wouldn't tell a loved one if they were struggling with mess and clutter, but that often run through our mind, and those drive our choices, right? If we are stuck in that, we're not likely to take action. So once I was able to shift that very harsh and mean girl narrative that was running through my head, that was a huge release. And I've never felt so much mental and emotional freedom, right? Because that shame is like emotional clutter. It's not good for us. And once I was able to separate myself from my stuff and not just sit and wallow in self-pity, guess what? I saw things in a completely different way. And I was able to make these positive changes, and I started taking a problem-solving approach. Made a huge difference, and I know you can do the same too. Reality is, it's way more productive for our time and energy to look for solutions instead of say all the things that are wrong with us and why we can't create a home that we love. So how can we help better the situation? What habits can we incorporate today that won't take long, that are going to help move the needle forward? What beliefs do we need to squash in order to get us unstuck? Who can we reach out to for support and encouragement along the way? Of course, you always have me, Coach Katie, in your corner, but maybe you need some in-person support from friends or family members. Another thing that can trigger this clutter shame is past experiences. And a common narrative I hear from people who are struggling with shame is that they're like, I bought your program and immediately was like, what's the point? I know I'm not going to finish this. I've bought other programs in the past and I didn't finish them, or what's she going to teach me differently that I don't already know? And they immediately question their ability or how they're able to implement what I teach them. And so they don't watch the videos or they don't take action because they've already made the decision based on past experiences, right? If you've decluttered and failed in the past, maybe for you that means you didn't complete the program or the clutter came back, all these different scenarios, that's going to drive your belief system. And what's interesting about shame is it has this central like social component to it. And it involves the fear of being judged, criticized, and honestly rejected by other people, which tends to be one of our worst fears as humans. And because of this, the origins of your shame might be tied to those past experiences I talked about. Even more interesting is that it doesn't even have to be a direct experience that you had. Maybe it was an experience a loved one shared with you about their shame around mess or clutter, and now it's become a fear of yours to be rejected, criticized, or judged by other people coming into your home, not because you've been, but because your friend or your mother or loved one has had that experience. For me, yes, I was definitely afraid of being judged by others, even if they didn't care if my home was messy. They didn't come there to like live and be in like a museum. They came there to spend time with me and my kids and my husband, right? Think about when you go to a friend's house, are you like inspecting the baseboard and checking for dust? No, like who cares, right? Yes, it's the fear of being judged by other people, even though you wouldn't judge other people that way, but it's like this constant judgment of ourselves when it comes to shame as well. Like I was my own worst enemy. And it wasn't until I started to give myself some self-compassion. Holy cow, who needs more self-compassion in their life? And so what does that mean? That meant I was combating that harsh inner critic we've been talking about with a more gentle, kind, like therapy voice, like my inner therapist, right? Using words of kindness to help combat some of those challenging and negative thoughts. The more I did that, the more it really changed my outlook, and I felt so much less insecure. And number 3, big trigger for clutter shame is comparison. I see this time and time again, and I've also experienced this firsthand. All of these perfect homes that are constantly being showcased on social media, Pinterest, Instagram, Facebook, the internet, home makeover shows, you name it, are not something that previous generations of people would have been so readily exposed to, right? We can hop on Instagram or Pinterest or any social media platform, YouTube, which you're spending time on now, and immediately see 8,000 videos with these beautiful dream homes. And then what tends to happen, whether we realize it or not, our subconscious brain sees these homes with no clutter, with nothing on the surface areas of any surface. They look like these pristine, beautiful, like you take your shoes off when you walk into that home type homes. And it goes, You are not measuring up. Look at your house right now. Holy cow, Katie, your house is a mess. Get your stuff together. And our sense of normal, right, which is our home, what we see and are surrounded by every day, becomes really skewed. And we think, well, no, that's the normal. Look at all these people. They have it together. So obviously it's me that has the problem. With this comparison aspect, there's also a theme that comes up for a lot of people, and they start to go, no one else struggles with clutter. I'm looking around at all these beautiful homes. I go, maybe you go to a friend or family member's house who just is, has more tools and strategies and is quote unquote better at, handling their clutter. Or maybe honestly, they just throw everything into a closed room when you come over and you don't know. But people tend to think the more they see these perfectly curated homes, I'm the only one that struggles with clutter. What does that do? It puts us in that shame cycle. What's wrong with me? I'm a failure. Everyone else can do it, but not me. So a few ways to combat this. Number one, watch where you spend your time. If you are spending your time on social media following people who appear to have these perfect lives and perfect homes, how do you feel when you hop off social media? Pay attention. Just tune in, slow down. Do you feel worse? Do you feel better? A lot of people I meet are like, yeah, actually I do feel worse, Katie, because I feel like I'm not measuring up, right? That's what comparison does. So maybe for you, that's spending less time watching certain videos or certain content or following certain people. Number two, you have to realize you are not alone when it comes to struggling with clutter, right? If that were the case, I would have one subscriber, you, but I have a lot more than one subscriber, right? I'm here to help the masses with a cultural clutter problem. And sometimes just knowing that, hey, it's not a me problem, like a lot of people struggle with this, it makes us just like, oh, like, okay, it's, we stop taking it so personally and feeling like we're flawed human beings. And we can, again, get back into problem solving mode instead of wallow in self-pity mode. And number three, and I think this is so important, is we need to shift our expectation. Perfection does not exist. Okay? It doesn't. I see so many people stress constantly over trying to create this perfectly tidy home and wanting to keep it that way. Y'all, that is almost as stressful as dealing with clutter, trying to chase your family around the house, constantly picking up after them, making your home appear spotless all the time, right? You just are like, it's this like panic mode, like my home has to appear perfect, right? It's stressful. Homes are meant to be lived in. Homes are meant to be functional. Homes are meant to be messy. Did she just say that? Did a declutter expert just say my home's supposed to get messy? Yes, I did. I sure did. And I 1,000% mean that. You should strive for a home that's easy to tidy. Yes, right? It's more manageable. I am not, giving you permission to hang on to all your clutter, but we shouldn't strive for a home that's perfectly tidy 24/7. It ain't possible. So sometimes that does mean lowering your bar a little bit. And when people can really wrap their heads around this and give themselves permission to not constantly try and be perfect or appear perfect through their home or whatever, their possessions, freedom. Just like the freedom you get from decluttering all of that stuff in your home that you don't even like in the first place, and that's draining your time, energy, stealing your peace and joy, right? We get freedom when we declutter. You also get freedom in releasing perfectionism. And one big shift I made over the years was not focusing so much on how my home looked, right? We are obsessed with perfectly curated looking homes. So instead of focusing on how your home looks, focus on how it makes you feel. When I see these little bits of expected mess pop up throughout my home, throughout the day, right? If I see Legos on the floor, that mess represents an opportunity and time well spent for my kids playing Legos, connecting, problem solving, working on their social skills, right? Working on figuring out, hey, whose turn is it to build with these Legos and whose turn is it to knock it over? There are so many different aspects and benefits from mess, right? Think about the mess that's left on your kitchen table after you have a family dinner. That was an opportunity for you to connect, talk about your days, talk about the good, talk about the bad, share something funny that happened that day. And you need to remember that mess isn't a bad thing. Yeah, it can be irritating, don't get me wrong, but look at it in a new light. It'll shift your perspective. It'll lighten your mental load. And again, the theme of this episode today, this video today, is really about finding freedom from that shame. Shame does not need to be a part of your story anymore. And it's time to take control of your clutter. And I am 1,000% happy to be there to support you. And I'd love to invite you to my upcoming 14-day Clutter Crusher Challenge. No matter where you are on your declutter journey, you will walk away with more tools in your toolbox with my proven strategies, and you will be freer from the mental clutter, the emotional clutter, and the physical clutter. And you will greatly appreciate my holistic approach to decluttering, and the tools I give you, you'll be continuing to use for a lifetime. So I hope you say yes to joining me in this program as 5,000 other people have. Just click the link below, and I hope to see you there.